Pierce Vaughn is a 24-year-old Delta Airlines flight attendant. And she didn't have much seniority this Christmas when Christmas was coming around. So Delta scheduled her to fly on Christmas Eve and all Christmas Day. But Pierce Vaughn has a father named Hal. And Hal is like, this will be the worst Christmas ever if my daughter Pierce is gone and flying the entire Christmas day. So do you know what Hal did? Hal bought 6 airline tickets, booked 6 flights, and starting on Christmas Eve, he flew every leg of every flight that his daughter had on Christmas Eve and all day Christmas. By the way, I have a picture of them here. This is Hal and Pierce getting her ready for the next flight, he said. Why would Hal do that? Because there's something in all of us that wants to be close to the ones that we love. There's something, God wired us for closeness. So today, as we continue this series, The Gift of People, I want to talk about a few people, godly people who God puts us in life with to be close to. If you think about it, God made us for closeness, to be close to Him and to be close to people around us. We thrive in life, I think, when we have people that we're in close relationship with. When you have close, godly friends, I think it gives life more meaning and more purpose. We're just made to thrive, made to feel that way. I have this idea, this key thought that it's in your handout, and hopefully it's a very simple thought. But this year, 2019, my challenge to you as we start this year is to give your relationship with God and a few godly people top priority. Make it one of the most important things that you do. Because all of us know that life goes so much better with a few close friends. And I think all of us dread the idea of being alone and spending time alone. In fact, some say the 2 biggest words in the universe are the words alone and lonely. When I say that, I think of Shay Robinson. Shay Robinson was turning 24 years old. Shay, you have to understand first, had been in and out of foster care for the last 11 years in Indianapolis. And for the last few years, she had been living with a Jenny and Matt Wing. But now she was about to turn 24. And if you know much about foster care, at least in Indiana, when you turn 24, then you can't be in foster care anymore. You're a bona fide adult and you have to go out and do life on your own. But Shay was like, well, I'm not ready for that. I don't even have a home. I need a family. And so Shay said she was sitting in church. And the pastor said, some of you here this morning know there's something you need to do, and now is a time to do it. So Shay wrote a text, and she said before she hit delete, she better hit send or she'd delete it. So she sent this to Jenny Wing, her foster mother, and it says this: can you think about adopting me? I really want a mom. Why would Shay write that? Because Shay needed someone that she could be close to. Shay had this big hole in her soul that she wasn't going to have a family anymore. And so Jenny and Matt Wing, they asked their kids, so should we adopt Shay? And her kids said, it's about time. Here's a picture of the family here. The judge allowed them to do an adult adoption. And now her name is Shay Robinson Wing, and she has 2 brothers and a sister. And the little guy drives her nuts, I'm sure. You know, things like that. But we all know that life works better when we're close to people that we care about and love. They say that now in our society, more than ever and any other time in history, people are reporting being lonely. And you would think social media with texting and the ability to call someone or do video chat at any time, you think that would connect us more. But connecting closely with another person is much more complicated than a text or a social media post. I think one indicator of the problem of aloneness in our society is the amount of selfies that I'm seeing. Okay, can I just say that? The number of selfies that you see on Snapchat or Instagram. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but my thought when I see someone post a selfie from like the Golden Gate Bridge, to me it just says, hey, here I'm at the Golden Gate Bridge by myself, you know? Or hey, I just climbed Half Dome by myself. You know, what good is that? Experiences with others is so much better. It's kind of awesome by yourself, but it's kind of weird at the same time. And so my invitation to you today is to pour your life into a few close godly friends. You don't have to do life alone anymore. Some call the aloneness problem in our society an epidemic. The good news is the Bible has an answer to this problem. And so open up your Bibles to Mark chapter 1. And for this series, starting today, I want to make our way through the book of Mark, looking at how Jesus related to and connected to closely with a few people, and how he spoke into their lives and how they even spoke into his lives. Verse 16, as Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake because they were fishermen. "Come follow me," Jesus said, "and I will send you out to fish for people." At once they left their nets and followed him. When he had gone a little farther, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and his brother John in a boat preparing their nets. Without delay, he called them, and they left their father Zebedee in the boat and with the hired men, and they followed him. Think about this with me. So Jesus is walking along, and he just simply says, "Hey, come follow me." He doesn't come up to these men and say, "Hey, I have a manifesto. If you sign it, you can follow me." He doesn't say, "Would you pledge this oath? Or would you promise to keep this list of rules?" He doesn't do any of that. He just says, "Hey, come, let's take a walk together. Let's do life together." And we see Jesus and his friends start to climb mountains together. They start to have meals together. They start to pray together. And every once in a while, he would say, "I have something really hard that I need to do. Would you do it with me?" Here's what Jesus did, some say. Jesus rebranded following God as something that is relational. It's not something we're meant to do on our own, but Jesus rebranded. Some call him a relational revolutionary. And he says that we as followers of God are called to do it together. We don't have to do it by ourselves anymore. So this idea of growing close to a few godly people, how does that happen? This morning, I want to share with you three keys or three thoughts from these first opening chapters of Mark that show us how we can grow close to a few godly people. The first key is this. The first key is to grow and develop trust. In Mark chapter 5, Jesus says this. He says, "Do not be afraid. Just trust me." Because when you get to know anyone, the first thing you ask yourself, isn't it, can I trust them? A big key in any close relationship is the ability to trust another person. It has to be there. We read in Matthew chapter 17, for example, that Jesus climbs a mountain, but he just invites three close friends, Peter, James, and John. Notice who he does not invite. He does not invite Judas Iscariot, the backstabbing frenemy. He doesn't invite him. You can't trust him. So why would you take him for this intimate moment they're about to have together? Trust, my point is this, trust is vital to closeness. If you want to come close to another person, you have to grow trust. You have to become a person who is trusted. Because who of us here this morning would want to open up our lives to someone who cannot be trusted? Who would want to have someone close to you that would stab you in your back, say the worst things about you when you're not around, will not defend you? Who needs someone in their lives who's overly critical or judgmental or just plain nasty? None of us. We all need godly people who we can trust. My invitation is to be that kind of person. When I talk about a person who can be trusted, it's not just with your confidence I'm talking about. I'm also talking about a person who can be trusted to be there when you need them the most. There are some friends who are like that, aren't there? There's some people that are like that, and there are some people who are not. A few years ago, my wife had an accident, a car accident near here, and it wasn't too bad. It totaled the car. She was fine. All right, it totaled the car. But she called me, and I was way on the other side of town, at least 20 minutes away. So I thought, I've got to get someone there who can just be with her. And so I said, "Did you call 911? And she said, "Yes." And so I called someone who I knew they officed near there. And so when I called them, they said, oh, yeah, that's too bad, Palmer, isn't it? I have some meetings and I can't go right now because I called to say, would you go just be with her until I get there? And this person said, yeah, can I call 911 for you? And I was like, no, we already did that. So goodbye. And so then I called another person. I thought, I know this friend, his name is Chris. If I call him, he lives right there. He'll be there, Johnny, on the spot. And sure enough, I called Chris. He said, I'll be right there. And sure enough, when I got there, he was there. And he had already given her a bottle of water. He said, Palmer, if someone has a car accident, they need a bottle of water. I was like, you bet they do. And it was hot. It was the middle of the summer. But that's a friend who you can trust. There are some people, they might be nice people, but I guess you can't trust them. That's the difference there. As we talk about this idea of trust, I'll use this word to describe them. A person who is safe. A person who will hold your confidence. I think there are some people in life I would describe as safe and some who are unsafe. And you know them. You've had them in your life. You think you can divulge something to them, or you think you can trust them with things that are close to you, and they use it to hurt you. They use it to violate your trust. Some people, I just want you to be aware of this, don't have the moral fortitude. They don't have the character to be trusted. Those are not the kind of close, godly people I'm talking about. My challenge to you, my invitation to you, is to be that kind of safe, trustworthy person here at the Grove where other people can come close to you. That's part of the challenge this morning. I said there are several keys to this idea of growing close to a few godly people. The first is trust. The second key is this, to be real with another person. And that maybe is even a little bit harder. Let's turn over one page in your Bibles to Mark chapter 2, and I'm going to start at verse 13. We read, once again, Jesus went out beside the lake. He's always walking, it seems like, by the lake, telling people to follow him. And a large crowd came to him. And as he began to teach them, as he walked along, he saw Levi, son of Alphaeus, sitting at the tax collector's booth. Follow me, Jesus told him. And Levi, by the way, this is also Matthew. Matthew is Greek, Levi is Hebrew for the same person. Levi got up and followed him. While Jesus was having dinner at Levi's house, I need to pause here. He meets this guy for the first time, and what does he say? Hey, I'm coming to your house for some food. That's how it happens. And we read, many tax collectors and sinners were eating with him and his disciples, for there were many who followed him. Let's pause there for a minute. We'll come back to this in just a second. Jesus, he meets this guy Levi, and what is the first thing that we read that he does? He comes to his house for a meal. It says a lot about the kind of relationship that Jesus wants. Because if you think about it with me, when you open up your door and invite someone into your house for a dinner, it's very vulnerable, isn't it? Because you're doing more than just opening the door of your house. You're opening the door of your heart and of your life. Because when people come into your home and they sit down for dinner, then you stop talking about the weather, you stop talking about football, and you start talking about your dreams. You start talking about the failures you've had in business, but the aspirations you have. You start talking about your kids and their futures, and you start to open up. I think that happens over dinner. There's also this risk that when you invite someone into your home, they'll see the worst things, or even maybe dinner goes really bad. For example, maybe the chicken you serve it, it's undercooked and it's bleeding. The manicotti is burned, that happens. Or maybe they told you were gluten-free, but when you were at Fry's, you forgot and you just bought regular rolls, and they're sitting there and they'll go, hey, so are these gluten-free? And you're like, oh, yeah, they are, there they are. And, just say that. Just, how will they know? That's what I figure, okay? They're going to be in the bathroom the rest of the night, but that's their problem, isn't it? Not yours. But it's true. When you step into someone's house, you step into their life. And that's the first thing that Jesus does so many times. He does it again with a man named Zacchaeus. He says, hey, stop hiding, come down here. We're going to your house to eat. Some call this being real, being authentic. Some use this language, deep disclosure. If you're writing anything down this morning, write that down. That's the invitation here, to start practicing deep disclosure with a few godly people. Deep disclosure means telling someone some things about you that really let them understand who you are and what makes you tick and what makes you different and what you dream of. That's what deep disclosure is. Deep disclosure is being able to honestly trust people or someone with something that is very close to you. And when you practice deep disclosure with someone else, they tend to practice it back with you. Deep disclosure is this willingness to let someone see into your life. It's opening up your heart so that you can be fully known. I think the temptation is to hide the real us. Rather than practice realness and deep disclosure and authenticity, our temptation is to hide. Let's keep reading here in Mark, and I'll show you an example of what I'm talking about. Verse 17, when the teachers of the law who were Pharisees saw Jesus with sinners and tax collectors, they asked his disciples, why does he eat with tax collectors and sinners? And so right away we see these Pharisees criticizing the person that Jesus is eating with. But to the Pharisees, Jesus says, what you lack in your relationship, and he said this over and over to the Pharisees, what you lack in your relationship is realness, is authenticity, is coming close to someone. And in Romans, we read, in Luke, let me pick up here. Jesus points out, I'm going to read from the Message Bible this time, but in the book of Luke, Jesus talks about the need to be real with others and to take off our mask, and he's talking about the Pharisees here. Luke 12, verse 2, Jesus' primary concern was his disciples. He said to them, watch yourselves carefully so you don't get contaminated with Pharisee yeast. Pharisee phoniness. That's so funny. You can't keep your true self hidden forever. Before long, you'll be exposed. You can't hide behind a religious mask forever. Sooner or later, the mask will slip and your true face will be known. And he says this about the Pharisees, the ones who were criticizing him. He says, you aren't real with anyone. You keep hiding. Paul in 2 Corinthians, he uses the example of Moses. And he says this in chapter 3. He says, Moses was up on Mount Sinai. Maybe you remember this from the book of Exodus. And when he was in the presence of God, in the Shekinah glory, his face started to shine and to glow. Some say he was glowing like a firefly, okay? And then he comes down the mountain and he's with the people of Israel. But the longer he's out of the presence of God, that glowing face is started to fade. And so Paul writes that Moses put on a mask and hid behind that. And Paul's point and Jesus' point is you don't have to live that way. You can never come close to God or to other people if you keep hiding and if you keep pretending that the problems aren't there or hiding the issues that are in your life. I think all of us have that temptation in life to hide our problems, to hide our fears, to hide our anxieties, and pretend that life goes better than it is. That's just how we're wired. We pretend that maybe we enjoy our career more than we do. We pretend that we're more successful than we are. We pretend that we're happier than we are. We pretend our kids are smarter than they actually are. I know your kids are smart, but not smarter than everyone else's kids in the room. They're smart, but we pretend that way. I know when I look at my life, it's something that going back to high school, I realize I have to work on this because we all have this tendency to hide our flaws and pretend that we are something else. When I talk about high school, I think about when I was in 10th grade. Most of you know that I grew up the son of poor missionaries. And when I was in high school, they sent my twin brother and I to live in the capital city, 200 miles away from my parents. And we moved in with some other poor missionaries. And their house, the house was okay on the inside. It was fine. It was a good house. No air conditioning in my bedroom, but that's a side story. Anyway, so our house, though, that we lived in sat at the corner of two dirt roads. And so every time a car went by, there was just big cloud of red dust that would come over our house. So the house was filthy dirty. The roof was full of dust. The walls were covered in dust. The window screens were caked with dust. The window panes were covered in dust. And I was kind of ashamed of the house that we lived in my sophomore year. So when I got a ride after basketball practice home with friends whose parents worked for the U.S. Embassy, would pull in off the main road, the street where our house was, and right when we pulled in, there was this really nice, beautiful brick, 2-story house with a shiny metal roof and with a green lawn out front and a big cement driveway and a gate that was always open. And so when we pulled in off the main road and someone was giving me a ride, I would say, hey, this is good, right here, just stop right here. And they would stop in front of that really nice 2-story house, and I would get out like I owned the place. And I would start walking up the driveway the whole time praying, please leave, please turn around, leave quick, please leave, because I didn't know the people that lived there. But what was I doing? I was trying to hide that we were poor missionaries. I was trying to pretend that we were some kind of diplomats, which we weren't. But the thing is, sometimes as adults, we keep hiding and we keep pretending. And I want to say you don't have to do that anymore. That's Jesus' invitation. You don't have to do that at the Grove anymore. This isn't a place where you'll be judged of your past or your shortcomings. And we want to invite you into relationships and into community where it is safe and safe to be real, where you can trust others. Being real, I'll just say this finally, will be one of the most courageous things that you ever do, but it will change the way that you do life with others. I said there are several keys, I think, to coming close to a few godly people. Here's the last one that I want to share with you this morning, and it's this: to share experiences together. The shared experience is one of the critical parts of being close to other people. In Mark chapter 3, we read about Jesus and a few close friends. So turn over one more page in your Bible, and we read this. Jesus went up on a mountain, so he did this a lot, and called out the ones he wanted to go with him. And they came to him, and he appointed 12 of them and called them his apostles. They were to accompany him, and he would send them out to preach, giving them authority over demons. These were the 12 he chose: Simon, who he called Peter; James and John, the son of Zebedee, who he nicknamed Sons of Thunder; Andrew, Philip, Bartholomew, Matthew, also Levi; Thomas, James, son of Alphaeus; Thaddeus, Simon the Zealot; Judas, the backstabbing Iscariot, and the frenemy of frenemies. And here, those were the 12 that he spent his time with. And he didn't just sit around and read scrolls with them. No, they did life together. They went mountain climbing together. We read that. They went through storms literally together. They went wedding crashing together. They went sailing together, fishing together. They had sword fights together. Shoot, they even went barefoot water skiing together, kind of, somehow, on water, barefoot on the way. They did that together. And then when life got really hard, Jesus sometimes would say, this is a tough night. Would you come and sit with me and pray with me? And they did. They worshiped together and they followed God together. My point is, they shared experience after experience together. Shared experiences have this way of connecting us to people, maybe like nothing else does. In fact, Monopoly has realized this. Just before Christmas, Monopoly, and it's sold out in most stores, came out with a new version of Monopoly. It's called Monopoly for Millennials. Anybody have that here? Anybody buy this? Get it as a gift. All right. Nobody. Next Christmas. But on the cover of the game, it says this: this game is about collecting experiences, not collecting real estate. And then they have this clause: because who can afford real estate anymore? That's true. And so Millennial Monopoly is about collecting experiences, and you become an experience collector. And you collect experiences like sleeping on a friend's couch, or doing parkour together, or doing bar class together. You know, these are all the different experiences. Grow a mustache together, those kinds of things. That's what you do with friends. But you collect experiences. Experiences have a way of bonding us and pulling us toward other people. You can have an extraordinary experience on your own. Like you could buy a ticket and go to the Super Bowl all by yourself in 2 weeks. But that would be weird. Not just lonely, it would be creepy. But the flip side is if you find 2 or 3 friends to go with, all of a sudden, it's the experience of a lifetime. Do you see why I say experiences bond? Do you know what they say about shared experiences? Change-making experiences bond us more than anything else. We didn't know this at the Grove. I just realized this recently. But this is one of the reasons we keep inviting you. You heard Gina say, come to Haiti with us and hold an orphan. Come to Liberia with us and share shoes in villages, in the forest, in the rainforest, on the back of a motorbike. Come do that. You know, that's an experience. That's why we have some people, we've had people go to Haiti, and I've heard guys come back and say, they didn't even know each other before they went. Now they say, we're brothers. They say things like that. That's the shared experience. And you don't even have to go that far. Come to Sacaton and paint a classroom building with us. Come downtown and live love in a community. And all of a sudden, relationships get stronger. I love how we have life groups here that do shared experiences serving together. Change-making experiences change us in a very powerful way. I want to end with this simple thought. This comes from Paul. This is Romans chapter 12. It's just one line. But he says this. Think about it with me. Be happy with those who are happy. In other words, share joy with those who have joy, and be sad with those who are sad, or share pain with those who share pain. My question to you as we close, it's a big question. Who in your life shares your moments of pain? Is there someone who comes close to you when you're in trouble? Who in your life shares your moments of joy? Are there people that come around you to celebrate the best moments? Are there people that are near enough that when you're in trouble, you know they're going to be there? When I say that, I think about J.C. Spencer, and I'll end with this. J.C. Spencer is about 80 years old, and he lives in Houston. And if you remember when there was flooding in Houston, it like flooded most of the city, it seems like. Well, J.C. was in his house, he said, when his house started to flood. So he dammed up the doors, and he said he thought that would stop the flooding. But the water kept coming in. Soon it was up to his knees, and then it was up to his waist. And J.C. said, all of a sudden I realized my wife and I could die. So J.C. picked up the phone, and he made a phone call, and he called this, true story, he called Chick-fil-A. He did. Yeah, and the manager at Chick-fil-A answered it, and he said, and the guy said, hey, this is J.C. And he says, J.C. And the manager said, I knew who it was. I knew who J.C. was because every morning he comes to Chick-fil-A and he orders a grilled burrito with extra eggs. So the manager said to J.C., J.C., man, we're not open today. He said, I'm just trying to rescue some of our equipment. So I'm not going to be able to make your grilled burrito with extra eggs. And J.C. said, well, I'm not calling for a burrito this morning. He said, I'm calling because I'm in trouble. He said, my wife and I, I'm afraid we could die here. Could you come rescue me? And the manager said, of course we'll come rescue you. Of course we'll, J.C. And they wrote down his address. And Cindy, one of the managers, her husband, she said, my husband has a Sea-Doo. I'm going to get him out there right now. So Cindy sent her husband out. Here's a picture of Cindy's husband pulling into JC's living room to put his wife Karen on the Sea-Doo. And when Cindy sent her husband, she also handed him 2 grilled burritos with extra eggs. That's true. This is true. And he delivered those too. And he rescued them. What's the first lesson here? Be nice to fast food workers. Be nice to fast food workers. The second thing is, I know some of you are jonesing right now for a grilled burrito with extra eggs, Chick-fil-A. But sorry, today is Jesus Day. This is Jesus Day. They're closed. They're closed right now, so you can't have one till tomorrow. But as I heard JC's story, and I just heard it like a couple of weeks ago, and I heard JC's story, my heart hurt because I thought, it's great that he can call the fast food restaurant down the street, but where are JC's neighbors? Where are JC's friends? Where are JC's sons and daughters? So you'd think you'd call those people first. Now, fortunately, he had a friend in the restaurant business. But as we close today, I want to invite you to start pouring in to a few godly friends this year. It becomes life-giving when we do. I put some questions on the screen just to give you something to think about as we leave today. Do you have at least one person you can call when you have great news and you have to tell somebody? Or when you are down and in trouble, is there somebody who will come to you? Do you have several people you could drop in unannounced, uninvited at any time? Are there people in your life who you regularly share amazing experiences with, you do life with? Do you have people around you who would help you with practical things like going to the airport? Nobody wants to do that, or helping you move. Are there people in your life with whom you can honestly share your joy and sorrow and pray with and grow close to God with?